Welcome to Yoga for You, a channel tailored to helping you discover your very own unique yoga practice. Hello and welcome. Thank you for tuning into the Sagacity Spotlight, where we bring into light the people who are living their wisdom, their truth, and their passion, their purpose. Today's guest is going to be the lovely Taylor. She's going to talk about all things Joe Dispenza, cleansing her aura, teaching yoga by the age of 18, teaching yoga in Australia. And if you wait till the end, she'll even touch on psilocybin mushrooms and tools and books and things you can use to help develop your spiritual journey as well. Stick around to the end and check the comment section below for all the links and anything that could be useful, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you. All right, guys, welcome. I am here with the lovely Taylor and an amazing yogi friend of mine who has inspired me to be in beautiful ways. I've had this extraordinary opportunity to work with her, as you may have seen on the channel, some other yoga videos we've produced together. Today, Taylor is in a snowy Big Bear City, while I am in a sunny Seattle City. And we're going to discuss whatever comes through, trusting in the nature of the conversation to guide us. But Taylor, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm staying warm. I'm staying warm for sure.
That's important. Sounds like you're going to be getting a lot of snow, huh? You ready?
2 feet over the next 2 days. I'm as ready as I can be.
I hear you. Are you going to get out on board or anything, or do any snowy flows, or what do you got planned?
If I'm in the snow, it is a snow walk or sledding or tubing. My partner is an extreme skier, and I have skied before in my life, but by no means am I an athletic person, but I'm very much a kinesthetic person. So I'll be out moving, I'll be outside, but you will probably not find me on the ski hill.
I love it. I love it. An unathletic yogi. That's interesting, but kind of beautiful.
I would definitely consider yoga to be kinesthetic rather than athletic.
I think that's fair. When did you first discover yoga?
I first discovered yoga when I was 15, and my stepmom took me to just some random class in her gym. I think it was a 24-hour fitness, and I went in with an open mind, and I honestly hated it. I was like, oh, this is weird, and I don't understand it, and I didn't get it at all. And then 6 months later, when I was 16, I got high with a girlfriend and we went to a yoga class that overlooked the beach because I was living on the coast at the time. And I just fell in love with it. I don't know if it was because I was stoned or if it was because I was outside or if like that class said, yep, now this is your path now. But something in that clicked for me, and I just went hardcore. I did yoga almost every day after that. I was super excited by it. 6 months later, I signed up for my yoga teacher training, and I was certified 2 months before I turned 18.
Wow, what a transformation. So from 15, not feeling it, to 18, being that certified teacher. That's got to be a whirlwind of a transformation in those 3 years.
It was definitely a whirlwind of transformation, and yoga was only such a small part of that, but it was such a stimulator for the transformation that I experienced over those years, because I was in high school at the time, and I believe that I got a head start on a lot of things in life that people don't normally start until much later on. I started drinking when I was 14. I started smoking pot when I was 14. I started doing yoga when I was 15, 16. I started my very first very serious relationship when I was 15, and I just kind of feel like I got a head start. And that first romantic relationship that I was a part of was extremely toxic, and I hated myself. I hated my life. My mom called me a dark cloud because every time I walked into a room, I sucked any joy that may have been present in that space away, and I ruined everywhere that I went in because I was so devastated by life and by myself, and I just never found joy in anything. So that first yoga class on the beach overlooking the ocean outside with my girlfriend, like that sparked a whole new side of me that I didn't even know existed. And after I became a certified yoga instructor, I broke up with my partner because I realized that I was way better than that. Um, a couple months after that, my therapist that I'd been seeing for 7 years said, you know, Taylor, I don't think we ever need to see each other again. And that was sad because I'd seen her, you know, every week for 7 years, but also so liberating because she was saying, you're good. You can go fly on your own now. You're doing really good. And it was such a shift from that dark cloud to this transformation to the light that I see myself as now.
That's amazing. So yeah, I guess yoga can bring that awareness out. But so let's go back to that moment your therapist said, you're good, spread your wings and fly. What do you remember what those emotions perhaps you felt in that moment came to you? Did you feel like you were sovereign and true in that, or were you clasping and a little scared about the possibility of going through without a friend or a therapist at that time?
No, I felt so excited. I felt so honored that she saw me in a place where I am able to take care of myself moving forward. And now at this point in my life, I am seeking an an objective guide as some sort of therapist or someone that I can speak to now, because I think that support is so crucial. But in that moment, I think I laughed and I just said, oh, thank goodness. I'm so glad to be out of that rut that I've been in for as long as I can remember, and be in a place where I'm confident in myself enough to step into myself without someone needing to hold my hand once a week.
Totally. And it's like you said, it's important to distinct that is healthy too for a lot of people. I mean, that's what gets us through, right? But to be able to ultimately strengthen ourselves to that point where we can spread those wings. I mean, I think that's what a lot of people initially intend to get out of therapy. It's just, a lot of times some people just maybe lack the correct therapist that speaks to them or the situations. But I think it's important to hear you talk about, those, I mean, 15 to 18, my goodness, if that's not the most transformative 3 years of anyone's life, I don't know what is. I mean, you got high school, you're going into high school, you're in high school, you're graduating high school, perhaps. I mean, you're figuring out who you are and who your friends base is. How did yoga define your friends base in high school?
I have been a dancer since I was 9 years old, and I have always found community and friends within my dance tribe. So I was very heavily a part of my dance studio, and I was very heavily a part of my high school's dance team. So those were my friends, and that was my community and the people that I hung out with. And a lot of them were partiers and drinkers, and that's, I think, a huge part as to why I was in part of the rut that I was in. But that also gave me a sense of community and a sense of purpose and drive in life. So when I found yoga, it was this whole other side of community that I could connect to, but without this kind of let's go out and rage every night and drink because we're messed up teenagers. It's let's maybe have a glass of wine and sit down and talk about the depths of our soul while we stretch. It was an entirely different community that I had never experienced before, that I had never even known existed before, especially thinking back to that very first yoga class I took at 24-hour fitness. It was just, people looking to work out, I think, and I didn't get that sense of community there. And at this point in my life and over the past few years, yoga has been my source of community. It has brought me across the world. It has brought me tribes and places that I never thought I could find tribe. It gave my soul a sense of community.
Wow, that's so beautiful. And I think deep down, that's what we all are really striving for is community. I mean, that's one of the most the innate human desires is that sense of belonging that can be so convoluted in today's society, where that sense of belonging can manifest in forms like codependency, as we know, and other validation seeking tactics. But community is a healthy way to approach all those same words I just mentioned. So what advice would you have for anybody who may be 15 or 16 right now and are curious about yoga? Maybe they stumbled upon this video, maybe they're going through a hard time. What advice would you have for anybody who's considering what yoga is and just maybe on that fence still?
Just get into it. Just go. It's such an individual journey that your experience with yoga is going to be completely different than my experience with yoga. And anybody that's going to listen to this, their experience with yoga is going to be completely different. That self-awareness and that sovereignty is one of the greatest things that I walk away from every time I do my yoga practice. And I think that yoga is such a gift to understanding the self, but there's no way to even start that unless you start yoga, unless you just go in. And I hear all the time, oh, I can't do yoga because I'm not flexible or because I'm not strong enough. And well, that doesn't actually matter. You don't do yoga because you're not flexible. Yoga was traditionally designed as a way to prepare the body to sit still for a really long time for meditation, and we've strayed so far away from that. And I think that evolution is really beautiful. But going back to those roots, there's no specific requirements. Just do whatever feels good. Just go into it and notice how you feel, what feels good, what doesn't feel good, how can you adapt and evolve with those feelings, and just go along for the ride. It's just such a self journey that to just start is the first step. Just take one class, one beginner's yoga class, find a local studio, just start and keep going.
Yeah, that's powerful and very, very true. I'm happy that you said all that. It's it is as simple as just getting in there, and then, you know, if you feel good, remembering that you feel good, right? And not forgetting that it feels good. I mean, it's, in a way, it's similar to working out. There's these endorphins that are released, the tension is released, there's this stretch that's happening, and it can feel so much better after, yet the next day or the next week. There's something like a block in some of our minds from time to time, maybe you've experienced, where it's like, I don't need to do that. I don't want to make time for that. But then, you know, it comes about halfway through, maybe to the 2/3 of the way through of that flow, whether it's yin or whether it's vinyasa or whatever. And then you get to that place where you find that self again. And at least for me in my personal practice, I found that a lot of times they say when you don't want to do yoga is when you still need to do yoga, and that is part of the yoga. Now we're in a world now where it's important to nuance that and still be, you know, still use discernment to feel what you really need, but understanding sometimes the things that benefit us the most initially don't feel the best, especially if we're working through 2 or 1.5, in your instance, decades of trauma and muscle fatigue and, you know, stiffness. But
And
it's
if
really,
you don't mind, Ty, you said if it feels good, remember that it feels good. And I think something important to touch on as well is if it doesn't feel good, don't run away from it, because it's that uncomfortability in which we grow the most. And I see a lot of students and a lot of people that really try to push their growth because they have this idea that they need to be super flexible, or they need to do super strong poses. They need to be able to do handstand push-ups to be a master yogi. And that has nothing to do with it, but it's sitting in that uncomfortability. When a stretch is tight and it's not necessarily pleasant, that's okay. It's part of the opening and the growth process. So there are definitely going to be moments where it feels really good and connective and opening, and there are definitely going to be other moments where it's like, fuck man, this hurts, I'm tired, I don't want to do this. And that's all okay too. It's part of the journey. The amount of times I've sat in half pigeon and just started bawling without knowing why, it's all just part of it. It's all part of it.
absolutely great distinction. Thank you for saying that. So let's move on a little bit to where you've been teaching for how many years now? So how old are you now?
I will be 24 in 3 months. So I've been teaching for 6 years.
Wow.
I was certified in April of 2015. So 6 years.
Nice. That's coming up on your 6-year anniversary right now. That's beautiful. And I would imagine your teaching style has changed tremendously. When you, those first couple years teaching, were you in a studio? Were you in a gym? Were you doing privates? How did that look for you?
My first year or so, I was just in a studio. I was trained through Core Power Yoga, and I taught with them for a couple of years. That was family, that was home for me. And the way that their classes and their training is set up is you learn one very specific sequence. You memorize and know that sequence. It's called their C1 class. And that's part of the training, is you learn this C1 class. And that was pretty much all I taught for the first maybe 8 months or so that I was teaching with Core Power. And then after that, I advanced up into teaching C2s. I would sub some C3s, and that would just grow in the difficulty of the class as well. But in C2s and C3s, the flow itself had more room for creativity. The C1 was very specific. It's the C1 flow. You have to do this. It's this exact structured thing, very similar to a Bikram kind of class. And when I loved teaching C2s and C3s because, like I said, I've been a dancer. I've choreographed for a very large portion of my life. So being able to get really creative about how I bring these different poses together and the transitions between them, and that was a lot of fun. And then I started doing privates probably about a year after I got my certification, and that was a lot of fun too. I had some really great connections with a couple of people, and one of my guides in my certification class, the one that was one of the teachers that was teaching me during my certification, had moved to Australia and found a lover, and they opened up a yoga studio, and he just messaged me randomly on Facebook one day. I remember it was in January, and he said, "Hey, you should come move to Australia and teach at my yoga studio that I've just opened up with my new girlfriend." And
What?
I said, "Okay, great." I was in my fourth semester of community college, so I said, "Let me finish this semester first, and I will take the next plane out there." I remember so specifically, I finished my finals that semester May 25th, and I left May 28th. I was like ready to go.
Wow, you didn't miss a beat.
No.
So that's what you mean by, that was probably the start of what you mean by yoga taking you around the world. How was that experience in Australia, yoga versus yoga in the States? I mean, it's got to be a little different, right?
That was where the community of yoga meant more to me than anything, because that was what brought me out there, was yoga. So that was the only place that I knew. That one friend that I had was the only person that I knew. So teaching at the studio, I started with 5 classes a week. I just dove right in full
Wow.
time. I wanted to be busy. I wanted to connect. I wanted to teach. And it was incredible. I had never lived abroad before. I was 19 when I moved out there. So I was there for all of the experiences that were available to me. And that was an incredible time. Some dramatic moments too that we don't need to get into during
Of
this
course.
call, but
Of course. That's what happens.
it was an incredible time. I would go back in a heartbeat.
That's amazing. How was the support of your parents at the time when you were like, I'm 19, halfway through college, and I'm going to go and just go do yoga in Australia? Were they supportive of that?
By that time, I had already traveled quite a bit, and I am the oldest of my siblings, so I have always been the pusher of boundaries in my family. So by that time, my parents had accustomed to the fact that they have no reins over what I do. There is no fence around me in regards to what they say I can or cannot do. So as soon as I saw that message, I finished speaking with my friend Jay, told him that I was interested, and immediately I called my mom and said, "Hey, I'm moving to Australia in a couple months." And she said, "Great, I can't wait to visit you."
No way. That is love.
Yeah,
That's support.
yeah.
There's something about a parent being willing to understand that it's important to let your child go and experience life that is almost invaluable. You know, a lot of people wish for that, but it's good to hear that that is attainable for some too, you know?
It wasn't always like that, so it's definitely attainable. I pushed a lot of boundaries to get there, but we have a wonderful relationship now.
So important. That's awesome. And so you're in Big Bear now. Where's your family based? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Orange County, and when I moved back from Australia, I had every intention of going back for a second year, and the visa situation in Australia is very challenging. So my second visa took 5 months to be denied. And the entire time I was just kind of mooching off my parents because I had expected to go back to Australia. I had a whole storage unit. I was paying rent still at my house in Australia for 3 months of that. And it was a whole dramatic experience. And when I got the decline 5 months in after being back home in Orange County, I said, okay, well, great, what's next? And I moved out to Palm Desert, just outside of Palm Springs. And during that time, my parents moved up here in Big Bear. So my parents and my family are here in Big Bear. My brother's just down the mountain, and my sister's in Northern California. But there's been a lot of shifting and moving in all of our parts. But now we are all here, based in Big Bear.
That's huge. I mean, that's community too in a big way. How has your family, how has your love for yoga over the years inspired your family's understanding with it? Have any of them taken up yoga as a product or a byproduct of your exposure to it?
My mom is the only and most person that has. She's my number one support system in everything that I do. So she was always there at every single class I taught when I was first teaching after I got certified. She has always been my right hand woman, and she tells me all the time that I am her greatest teacher, that I came into her life to teach her the things that she wouldn't have had otherwise. So this was a path that nobody in my family had ever gone down before, that they had never been exposed to before, even really knew was an option for them. And I just kind of said, well, I'm going to create it as an option for myself. And my mom went, oh, that looks like a really interesting path. I think I might just follow you down and see what happens. And now she's Reiki certified. She's got all these beautiful
Wow.
beads. Like I think having me go down that path really opened up her eyes to an entirely different side of the world.
I could only imagine she saw the expansion that was happening amongst through you amongst the yoga industry. That's beautiful. Did she ever get to visit you in Australia?
Yes, her and my dad both came out for about a week and a half while I was out there.
Wow, I bet that was so special.
It was really special, actually. It was during that time that we had become friends for the first time, as opposed to children and parents, because they saw me living my life in my space, in my way, doing things that I want to do, and they had never seen that before. I've always been their little girl in their house, going down this very specific path, and I think they knew that I was different, but they didn't really get to experience that fully until I got to experience that fully, being out of their house and in my own space. So when they came out for Australia, I think that was the first time they saw me for me, because it was the first time I saw me for me as well. So that was a really beautiful time for the three of us to get to know each other as humans. And that was when my dad told me that he smokes more pot than Bob Marley, and
No
he
way.
past 30 years. So we,
Oh
it
man.
was an incredible time.
Wow. Breaking down the barriers, pushing those boundaries. That
Very much so.
you really did. That's good to hear. That's inspirational. So it sounds like to me you've had a pretty epic yoga career so far, and at 6 years into the teaching atmosphere, from teaching C1, eventually C2 and C3 through Core Power and various studios you had set up. How would you say your approach to yoga classes now are in comparison to in the past? What do you focus more on through your classes now? What are you trying to bring into your students and just to the general experience of anyone who attends one of your classes?
A lot of teaching for me is just a complete flow state. I half the time I would say I go in and have absolutely no idea what's going to come out of my mouth or what kind of class we're going to do, and it just kind of happens. And there are other times when I go in with a very specific intention, and even with that intention I still don't know exactly what I'm going to say. It's really such a deep flow state for me that I feel like Taylor gets set aside, and whoever is guiding my teaching steps in and just guides and teaches and speaks for me. I don't even know what I'm saying when I'm saying it. I used to put a lot of stress on myself to make my flows perfect, and that brought more stress than ease for me. So now my perfect world is to have a simple guideline of poses that I would like to go through and lead the students through, and then the rest of that just kind of falls into place. And I don't feel like I could qualify under any category in regards to the style of my classes, because sometimes it's vinyasa, but other times it's hatha, and sometimes it's vinyasa hatha, sometimes it's yin, and sometimes it's dance yin. I really don't know. It's just a jumble of movements that feel good to me when I'm moving on my own. I do try to practice the sequence that I'm going to teach by myself, so I know what feels good coming up next. Where does my body naturally want to go after this position? So it's really just a very fluid practice for me, putting the classes together and then teaching it in general.
That's amazing. There's so much in that, I mean, intuition is huge, right? We're moving into that, allows that more of connected state via flow. That's huge. So how have you managed to navigate the last year? I know it's been really challenging for a lot of yoga teachers and studios across the entire world, many of them closing up shop and forcing people online. Have you found solace in maybe the yoga community still being there, maybe perhaps online or park yoga? What have you done to get through this past challenging year of 2020?
I moved back to Big Bear in April of last year because my partner and I were living in Portland, Oregon, and it was a shit show up there when COVID started. So my parents said, just come on home, which is how we landed back in Big Bear. Again, this is my second time living here full time. And while we were living in Portland, we were there for about 9 months. I never taught a single class, not online, not in a studio, not even before COVID happened. I never taught a single yoga class. And that was the first time I had not been teaching regularly since I've started teaching. So I saw that as a time for me to integrate everything that had happened the years before in regards to yoga. And it gave me the opportunity to be a student again, because during that time I didn't stop doing yoga. I actually think I did yoga more during that time as a student than I had before. And it gave me the opportunity to fully receive on the other side of the classroom. So when COVID hit and I moved back here, and I already had a really great relationship with the yoga studio here because I had taught here before. And when I told her that I was back and wanted to teach, it was just so synchronistic and perfect and wonderful. And we did outside yoga during the summer with, COVID regulations. And then it got really cold and very dark very early in the mountains, and it switched to all online. And I was just so happy to be teaching again that I didn't care if I had one student, if it was online, if I had no students, I would still do yoga. I was just so grateful to be on the other side again, because I had spent so long receiving that I was like, oh, I have so much to give now. Let me teach, let me share, let me be at the front of the class. I'm ready now. So I was just happy to be teaching again. And it just happened to work out so perfectly for me to land home in Big Bear with a community that already trusts me, that I already trust and know. And it just worked out perfectly.
Yeah, it sounds like you found exactly where you were to be next. And when it works that fluidly, it's almost like, oh yeah, of course, so obvious, right? Like we can't deny that or question that. It's nice when we have that kind of inkling to the experience in general. But what would you say you studied most in that year, or just under a year of student exploratory, more of like what you were going through with yoga? Where did you find yourself naturally at that point in your career drifting towards? What style, or maybe teaching or meditation?
I had during that time gotten far deeper into yin yoga than I ever had before. So it was a very slow and restorative and integrative time for me to really just settle in. But up until that point, I had been around so many of the similar styles. I had a lot of the same teachers for years, and I hadn't really been exposed to anything new. So I was just wanting to soak up as much as new information as possible, whether that was new yoga poses that I had never thought of before, or new transitions, or new flows, or new ways of seeing things or saying things. I was just constantly trying to receive and soak up as much information as possible so that when I was ready to teach again, when I did have that opportunity to do so, I could come in fresh and new rather than feeling like I was in this kind of stagnant state, teaching the same stuff that I had been teaching for the past 4 years. So that time, I'm not sure there was one specific thing that I felt like I was really focusing on. It was really more of a time for me to just freshen up my practice, freshen up my understanding of yoga, my perspective of the practice, and bring a new taste into how I show up in the yoga world.
Yeah, that's general and that's good because I mean, honestly, if you tried to limit yourself at that point, you would still be exactly doing just that, limiting yourself, right? So saying yes to everything in that time of you more than likely felt or maybe I should ask that question. Did you feel it was a time for grow or did your teaching world just kind of close up a little bit and then you came to the realization it was time to just grow and learn?
The latter, 100%. When as soon as I moved up to Portland, I said, "Great, let's find a yoga studio. I want to keep teaching because I had been teaching consistently up until that point, so it was all I knew. It was a stability point for me, and I found a studio that I loved. And I emailed them multiple times and said, "I really want to be a part of your team. Here's my resume. Here's my past 4.5 years of experience teaching yoga. I'm ready. I want to join." And they said, "You just missed our teaching auditions. We don't have anything open right now, but we can give you a discount on our student package." So I was like, "Okay, great, I'll take that for now and try again next time." I didn't try again next time because after a couple weeks of that, I realized this is exactly what I need to be doing right now. Just as you said, when everything works so perfectly, there's no doubt in oh yes, this is exactly where I need to be. And things were working so unperfectly to this idea that I had in my mind that it was so clear to me that there was a different plan. And I just kind of succumbed and surrendered to that and said, "Okay, I need to be a student right now and I just need to receive." And I'm totally open to that. But it did take me a moment to get there.
Yeah, I could imagine. It sounds like there's been a lot of moments in your life. I mean, as in all of our lives, right? Whether we choose to realize it or not, where we are kind of stifled or shut down a little bit. And the only logical, the path of least resistance, I should say, is to just kind of accept and see what is being asked of you. How have you, whether that's being denied your visa for Australia or denied the ability to teach in Portland and so many others, I'm sure in between, how have you managed to stay in that state of observation where you can intuitively decipher, okay, then that's not what I need to do? Is that a hard state for you to stay, or is that a hard state for you to stay in general, or has it become easier, or what are some tips you have on that?
It has grown easier for me, but I think that it has always been a rather natural inclination for me. If you ask my mom how I was as a baby, the very first word she says is observant. I'm always soaking in all of my surroundings. I'm constantly reflecting. I'm constantly observing, constantly learning from what's happening around me, from what's happening within me. So I can look back from when I was younger to all of these moments where I was shut down and reacted very poorly and definitely did not ask, "What is the universe trying to show me here?" Instead, I would throw a fit and get cranky as teenagers would. And it's gotten much easier as I grow up, but it always has been. It's been rather natural for me to an extent, of course. But I think the greatest tip that I can ask is if there is a block that's being faced, it's very clear that that is not the direction that's supposed to be going down. I think of a river. If a river is going and there's a giant boulder in the middle of the river, the water's not going to try to move it. It's just going to go around it. So I focus on where are the boulders in my life? Where are these very obvious blocks that I'm not supposed to go down? And how can I be like the water and just go that way, because clearly I'm not supposed to go that way. I have no intention of moving that boulder. It's there for a reason. I'll just flow a different way and see how that goes. And maybe I hit another boulder along the way and I go this way, and then I hit another boulder and I go this way. And I think that's just part of the divine journey of life. But a really good question that I find helps when I reach those boulders are, what is here for me instead? Where am I meant to go instead? Where is the universe trying to take me instead? Because clearly this is not it.
That is so beautifully said, and it's so simple, you know, in the teachings. And obviously each situation for each person can differ in that observation ability, but it is just that, you know, channeling into these 5 elements that surround us at all times of the day. Without a single one, none of this would be, right? I've been kind of on a big elemental trip lately with just understanding how beautifully laid out it all is, you know, and how at any given moment we can interact with at least one of the elements. It leads to a deeper, profound awareness. And that, what you just said, is just that. It's another divine way where the element of water gets to teach us what it means to be fluid in our emotions and our life and everything. So, wow, good job. Thank you for offering that to me in particular, and to the world who sees this. That's really nice. Where do you see your teachings going? I know that's maybe a loaded question for you, but if you had to decipher intuitively, where do you feel like you're being called to go with yoga in the next coming months or years?
I have always known that I was going to be teaching for my entire life, but I have absolutely no desire to make it a career. I have no, I would be, yoga for me is a hobby that I can make a little extra cash on the side on. I have absolutely no idea of where I'm going, of what it looks like. My dad is an entrepreneur, and he has all of these really grand business ideas of what I can do with yoga, of opening up my own yoga studio and creating this branch of yoga studios, or creating an online platform. He has all of these different grand ideas, and I've shut down every single one of them because they are just not for me. I am here to give the gift of my teaching when I can and when I want to. And I have released the pressure of trying to do something really big and grand with it, because there are a lot of people in the world doing really big and grand things with yoga. And I think it's wonderful. And I'm so grateful to be a part of them, but I have no desire to try to create it myself. So I'm just here along for the ride. I will no doubt in my mind be teaching until the day that I die. I would be honored to do so, but a couple classes a week, a couple classes here or there. Maybe one day I'll do a yoga retreat somewhere in a tropical island somewhere, but I just have no idea, no desire to do something so grandiose with yoga. For me, it's a private, sacred practice, and that's all I need from it.
That's awesome. It's good to know that, right? It's good to be confident in that, and also contain the understanding that at any moment that could change. I like how I could definitely see you doing retreats. I mean, you're very in touch with the local community, the strong feminine community up there. I see you being such a strong, fearless warrior woman up there, leading a lot of women to find that sovereignty within themselves. So I can personally speak on seeing a great importance for what you do and how it could begin to permeate into some life-changing retreats in the future, should you decide to, or should you feel that calling, right?
Well, thank you.
Of course. I just got to say it. So a couple more questions I have for you before we get ready to close this out. But for anyone listening who's made it this far, and I hope that's a lot, because this is just such densely beautiful knowledge and information and wisdom in the yoga industry, and the glimpse of it, the yoga industry, how it is affected you at such a young and prosperous age, right? So through that time, just because we know how it is in the world, and you know, this video can inspire people, the classes can inspire people, but we want to be able to provide someone with tangible items to be able to bring into their home, bring into their space, and absorb on their own accord whenever they feel called to do so. Have there been any books or any texts or any things, videos, anything that you found to help further illuminate your path in yoga over the years?
Specifically in yoga, I wish that I had more, but specifically in yoga, I don't. It's always, like I said, it's been such a channel flow state for me that I really haven't spent much time doing much physical research on that because I've never felt really called to. It just comes to me so naturally and fluidly that whatever research or whatever information does come to me, I soak it up and I take it in and I walk away with it very grateful. But I don't have any specific memories or knowledge of seeking out that information. So I wish that I had more tangible things to offer specifically in regards to yoga. There have been a lot of tools that I've used in my spiritual journey, but they differ from my yoga journey to extent. And those things that I've taken along my spiritual journey, I embed into my yoga journey as much as I can, but I haven't done much yoga specific seeking.
Yeah, I understand that. So have there been any books or anything just in general that's led to your spiritual growth? Maybe you said there's been some things you integrate, and I'll leave it totally up to you to speak on whatever it is that you feel called to. But are there anything that you would recommend people diving into a little bit deeper?
Yes, so Dr. Joe Dispenza is just a gift. He has such a wonderful way of blending the science and the spiritual side of the world and meshing them into one and putting it in such a clear-cut way that it is just I read it and it's like, oh duh, of course, this is how the universe works and this is how I work. And he is just a gift. I recommend any of his work to anybody, his experiences and his perspective. The one of the biggest books I have felt has deeply connected with me is called A Return to Love. It's by Marianne Williamson, and and the whole book is kind of a reflection on A Course of Miracles, which is a little more of a popular book. But Marianne Williamson fell in love with A Course of Miracles. It changed her life, and then she wrote an entire book based on her reflection of it, and that's A Return to Love. And I read the first chapter, and I swear that this book was written for me. The way that she wrote it, the way she put her words together, I understood it in a way that I've never understood anything before. It is light and simple information, and I highly recommend it to anybody that is looking to come to a better understanding of themselves and of the world and how to approach life with a deeper gratitude of love. And beyond, those are the two authors that come to mind the most. The Celestine Prophecy is a really popular book, and I think that that's a really popular first book for a lot of people's spiritual journeys. It wasn't my first book, but it was huge. I highly recommend reading into that one as well. And then any research that I can do on the spiritual body, on the etheric body. My partner and I study Alice Bailey, who's been studying the esoteric world since she was really popular in the 1920s. So she was way ahead of her time, and she is awesome. Alice Bailey, all of her work, it's so dense and it's so hard to read, but really, really good information in that. And the deeper understanding that I can have of the etheric and the subtle energy of myself, that's, the chakras and the centers and human design and astrology and all of these aspects of myself that I can bring together to understand myself best are awesome for me. So anything like even those weird kooky Facebook personality tests, I think are such wonderful spiritual tools to help understand the self, even just a degree more. 1 degree at a time is at one point going to take you 360 degrees. And any small tool that we can find is always going to be a huge help. My oracle decks have been a huge help for me. This was the very first one I ever had, the Sacred Rebels Oracle, and this was the deck that led me to my now fiance. It changed my life, and self-awareness tools, I think, are the number one thing that can be used to help guide in this journey.
That is so beautiful and so true. I mean, those little, just being able to have communion with these guides, right, in their own ways. Sometimes it's hard to hear, but using oracle card decks and beautiful things like that. I can also reverberate right back to the depth and power of the Celestine prophecies. I've just absorbed it on this trip I'm on, and it
Oh,
is,
wonderful.
oh my gosh, it is remarkable. So we're definitely going to put a list of those beautiful recommendations down below. So anyone who is looking to dive a little deeper in a new way, they can just check it out right down there. But thank you for your time and your story and your light. You know, you are, as your Instagram defines you as in this now moment, radiant. I've said that since day one. You're beautiful in all that you are and do. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to work with you and to continue to use this beautiful source of technology to share your story and the stories of others and your teachings and the teachings of others. And it's through moments like this that we can really begin to ultimately elevate the consciousness of us all, right? That's really all we're here to do, as Ram Dass beautifully stated. We're just walking each other home, right? Just lock arms and let's take each other home. But I wanted to give you the floor to say any last moment words or anything to anybody who may be listening so far.
There was one tool that it was the first tool that came to mind when you asked me of tangible things to take home. And psilocybin mushrooms have been such a potent medicine for me along my spiritual journey, but I use them as a tool. I use them in a ceremonial, sacred journey way to dive in and understand myself deeper. And I didn't start off with that, even though it was the first tool that came to mind, because I was a little nervous and timid about how that could be walked away with, but I have no control over how your watchers walk away with my information. But I think psilocybin mushrooms, with going in with the right intention and in a safe space, just I don't want to like promote drugs, but it's been such an incredible tool for me to understand life and understand the way that I work and see things in a way that I haven't before. And it's an incredible tool. So I highly recommend it given the right circumstances and smart intentional circumstances. And beyond that, I think that, you know, everyone that's listening, you're all doing a great job. You're all rocking it. You know, if you've gotten this far into this podcast, you're on the right track, whatever that means. And your path, your track is going to look so completely different than mine, than Ty's, than all of your following guests after this. It is going to be so different. And one of the greatest lessons that I've learned in this life, and something that I will continue to learn through this life, is to just let go of the comparison and let go of the idea that your journey needs to look like mine or someone else's, because it's never going to. Walk your path and trust your path and trust your instincts and trust your gut, because you always know. You always know. The mind is what doubts, but the heart and the belly and the body, it always knows. And you're doing great. Just keep going. Keep rocking it.
So beautifully said. And yes, those are great tools. Wow. Thank you for your presence and your time on this beautiful sunny day and snowy day where you are. You're like, sun, what? Snowy, sunny day, whatever, wherever you are.
There's no sun. No sun.
No,
There's
just
sun somewhere, but not visible.
not visible. I hear you. I hear you. Well, enjoy some nice snowy walks, perhaps, and make sure you're nice and bundled up with your warm tea. It's always nice to just stay inside and get cozy when there's snowing down like that. And we'll also source down links below any yoga flows that we've already produced at this time of releasing. And I encourage you guys to all just take a feel, right? Take a feel for what Taylor has to offer, and give it your present moment time, and and see what comes through. But Taylor, can't thank you with words in this experience, just how grateful I am to have you on here as being my first official guest. And it's definitely setting the tempo and setting a pretty epic line. So thank you for being here.
I can't thank you enough for inviting me to be a part of all of your projects. You are just such a wonderful human, Ty. It's an honor.
Thank you. Thank you. To many more, huh? To many
Yes,
more.
many, many more.
Hey everybody, really hope you enjoyed that talk. It was beautiful to have that experience with that shared guest. We have a lot of very useful information in the description section below, so be sure to check it out. I've also linked any and all videos with that individual in the description below, so check those out as well. It's an honor to bring this footage to you, and I hope you can come back and continue to deepen your practice. Namaste.